The Groovy Podcast. Now we say we're on air. I'm sorry. I thought we were already on air. Hopefully we were. For those of you who we were on air for, let me say it again. Actually, no. For those who weren't, oh, never mind. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. Welcome to another episode of the Groovy Podcast. Now, when I say around the world, this time I mean it literally. My name's Ken Kousen. I'm podcasting from Marlborough, Connecticut as usual, but this time we are privileged to be joined by...
I'm Jenn Strater, and I'm currently living in Berlin.
Yes, and Jen, you're from Minnesota, or at least I met you when you were in Minnesota, right?
Right. I've moved a few times. I actually grew up in the South. Went to college in upstate New York, spent some time in Jersey, spent some time in Minnesota. I think the last time I was on the podcast, we talked about the Fulbright that I got to go to Denmark. So I've lived in lots of places. Currently, I am in Berlin and would like to stay here for a little while.
So how's your German coming along?
I'm learning. I take classes once a week through my job. So.
Oh, okay, cool. I mean, ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch. Okay. From when I was in high school and earlier, I had a couple of years of school board German, and then back in the 90s, I had to go to a conference in Munich, and I took a little bit of a training class from my job at the time, and that's all the German I have, and that's probably best if I leave it alone at that point. Well, for those people who are not aware, Jenn Strater has been active in the Groovy community for many, many years. And actually, I don't know how you'd not be aware, both because she does have a solid public profile and also because we mention her a lot on the podcast, as you know. So if anybody actually does listen to that, they should know you. Is there anything you want to say about yourself by way of introduction?
Yeah, so I've been using Groovy for a while. I've definitely been a part of the podcast for a long time.
Yeah.
We might even have to go back and research. I might have been on the podcast before you. I was in one of the very, very early episodes.
Yes, you definitely were.
When Peter was still the host.
Oh, I remember that. You were on one of the first 5. I don't remember what number, but yeah, you were in one of the first 5 podcasts. Before I was listening back then. You probably remember as well the old Grails podcast that Glenn and Sven did. Remember that? That
was probably around the time I joined Groovy. I don't think that I knew about the podcast when it was actually running live. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was Glenn Smith and oh my goodness, I'm blanking on Sven's last name. Probably because I never did a good job of pronouncing it well. Sven. Oh shoot! And now somebody will send me the name, and I'll get it right at that point. But at any rate, I remember when Clausius, I think maybe, and then
Soren. No, that's Soren.
That's right. Yeah, that's Soren. Right. It was Sven Haiges. I think it's Haiges, something like that. And yeah, Glenn and Sven did it, and I remember approaching them a couple times, and I wanted to be a co-host on that thing way back in the day, because then I would joke that it would be Glenn, Sven, and Ken.
Oh yeah, that's true.
And 3 people all over the world, because of course Glenn's in Australia and Sven was in Europe at the time, but then moved to California, and then of course everything changed and Peter picked it up. The rest is history. But at any rate, I think I first met you when you were running the Great Ladies group in Minneapolis.
Yeah, so I've met you before that, but you probably will never remember me. So so I started working for Warm Health after Memorial Day, so maybe the first week of June, and then I went to Great Conf US that year, so like 2 months later, and you were one of the speakers, but at that point nobody knew who I was. I was one of the 6 women there. We counted, and that's kind of why we started Great Ladies. There were so few of us that year.
I do think I remember that conference, and I remember meeting most of the women there sitting at the same table, as I recall.
Yeah.
Maybe it was in the pub or something, in the bar afterwards or something like that, going to say hi. There was some event, that they were having after the conference. I mean, it wasn't untoward, to go.
Oh yeah, no, it was actually officially part of the thing. Like after one of the evening sessions, we went to we'd rented a space in one of the bars, and yeah, that was
Yeah,
the
I
first time
remember
I
that.
met Corinne. So
That's right. Yeah, I remember that. And that was oh, that's got to be a lot of years ago now. Well, at
5,
any rate. Okay.
yeah.
So you actually did something awesome that I have to mention is that you actually put in a pull request on the
Oh yeah,
on the Groovy podcast show notes
I think.
account, which it came up this week that somebody noticed that they were looking for the show notes and the old links weren't working, and that's because I hadn't been clear enough about the fact that Baruch made an actual location for the Groovy podcast show notes, an organization or something on GitHub,
Yeah.
and that is just to let people know again, just so I can not forget to mention it. We are at github.com/groovy-podcast/groovy podcast, all one word. And you found it, which is good. I mean, we did tweet the location this week, but only because somebody
Well,
asked finally because we'd forgotten.
because I had the same question.
Yeah. And were nice enough to give us a little bit of an outline of things to talk about. So that was great. I noticed the first thing you pointed out is something that was that Paul King mentioned earlier this week on Twitter, is that Groovy turned 15 years old
Yeah,
this week. Oh my goodness. You can believe that. When did you start working with it?
5 years ago. So I've been a third of Groovy's life now.
Really? Just 5 years? It seems like
Yeah.
you've been part of the community for longer than that.
I mean, I started right away. So like pretty much as soon as I started using Groovy, I jumped into organizer mode and started filling some of the vacancies that I saw in the community. I mean, I obviously had experience before Groovy, and I've been a developer for a lot longer than that. But Groovy itself is just since 2015.
Wow. I mean, of course, younger and younger people, or older and older people seem young to me now. So, I mean, it's, how it is. Wow. That's it's been a little while, 15 years. I think I got involved around 2007, 2008, that time frame. So that's still, after it was established, the first Groovy book I found an old Groovy book that was written by a Scottish university professor. It was just called Groovy Programming or something, and it was on a one version or something even earlier. It's unbelievably, now it's a historical artifact. I suppose I should put it on eBay, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it turned 15 this year, and of course now it's quite well established as an Apache project and everything. That was fun to see that. Now you mentioned also Daniel. Now, do you know how Daniel pronounces his last name? Is it Sun or Soon? Do you have any idea?
I don't actually. You should get him on the podcast and ask him.
That would be a great plan, except that, I mean, you and I have our own time zone issues.
Yeah.
He's in China, right? So that would be the other side of the world for me. Well, we'll have to work something out. And I don't know if he travels for conferences at all or not, but we'll have to try that. But at any rate, as you pointed out, Daniel has been posting a bunch of articles on Twitter.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
It's Friday, so I suggested he be the Friday follow on Twitter, because he's been posting a lot of interesting articles. He posted one about like why Groovy is gaining popularity. He started doing some legitimate advocacy for Groovy, which no one's done in a little while.
Now, I followed Daniel on Twitter, but when I just Googled his name for his Twitter account, I came up with about 6 of them. Do you remember which one is his actually? Oh, it's Daniel _SUN.
That sounds right.
Yeah, because it says Groovy and everything.
You'll see the picture, yeah.
The picture. I see something about Java's new garbage collector, which, that sounds like very likely.
Parrot parser. Daniel _Sun. It's the right account. But
I think he must have changed the picture. I mean, it says in his bio, Apache Groovy committer, so that's definitely the right one. But I think he must have changed the picture that you're referring to. But yes, definitely in there. There's several articles he's been talking about. Most recently about the garbage collector and stuff, and about the see that IDE review that they tweeted about the Coding Pro Camp. Did you see that?
I didn't.
Goodness,
I mostly just see the Groovy ones, the Y Groovy, and the thing that I thought was interesting was the Learn X and Y. I
Oh yeah,
actually,
right.
yeah, I messed up on that one. I thought that it was something that Roberto had done, and turns out there's lots of people that have contributed to it. So
Yeah,
it
I
looks
mean the
really
one
nice.
about the coding pro camp that he retweeted, you're better off missing out on that one because it was an
Uh-oh.
article called "Top 5 IDEs and Text Editors for Groovy," and the first one it lists is Groovy and Grail's tool suite, which
Oh
doesn't exist
no,
anymore.
maybe
Yeah, I
it's an
mean,
old article.
well, yeah, I don't think it is, and it's like, oh my goodness, boy, did they mess that up? But so be it.
Yeah,
But
I
yes,
mean, yeah.
the learning X and Y. I'm looking to see if I see that one there. I'm sure it's in there, but you say it was
Yeah.
contributed by a bunch of people.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll find it at some point. So yeah, Daniel has been extremely active on the Groovy 3 move, right? He's been doing a
Yeah.
lot of work on that part of it. The parrot parser, as you say, that's a lot of that's his baby, right? More or less.
Not his literal baby.
No,
Yeah. So he
I actually
he's done a lot of work.
I'm sorry, I have babies on the mind. My niece just had a kid, so that's my wife's go visiting and everything, and
Okay.
so that happened to be on my mind there. But yeah, I know he was very heavily involved in that part of the core team, and I know he has he became a core team member.
A while
It
ago.
says he actually put in his bio, wrote the new parrot parser for Groovy. I think that his development of that is what got them to bring him in as a core team member, I think. And then of course he's been working with Paul and the others.
Yeah, he's made some significant contributions. Definitely the all-star of new committers in the last several years. He's devoted a lot of time to it, and definitely is very patient. I know a lot of the things that he suggested were kind of new and maybe radical to some of the older Groovy committers. So I'm glad that he stuck through it and that he's continuing to contribute.
Yes, well, we definitely appreciate all of his efforts. Definitely, yeah, I agree with that. Another thing that you were going to mention was about now you got to go to Great Conf EU, right?
I did. I'm actually on the organizing committee for that too.
Oh, when did that happen? I didn't remember that you were involved.
So when I moved to Denmark, yeah, so I started helping. I mean, Soren does a majority of it. Like Soren does an unbelievable amount of things for that conference. But I try to help out with things that I can, like as a native English speaker, if with marketing and wording and things like that. I tend to be present too. So if I show up, he'll put me to work and we'll get stuff done. Yeah, so there was an interesting photo that came out this year that we had the orange suits. So I'm definitely in a very orange suit as part of the crew photo. No one can complain now that they don't know who's on the staff and who they can ask a question because we have very, very lovely bright orange uniforms.
Well, that's very helpful, bright orange there. Yeah, I have my little orange Grail shirt, I suppose.
Yeah.
This is the Keep Calm and Use Grails 3.x t-shirt that I got at one of the Great Confs. I think it was in the US, though. I've only been to Great Conf in Europe once.
Yep.
I think it was 2 years ago. But now you were in, as you say, you were a Fulbright scholar at, now, which university was it exactly in Denmark?
The Technical University of Denmark, so more of the engineering school. The school where we host the conference in Copenhagen is more of a digital media and arts university. Mm-hmm. And then there's like the University of Copenhagen, which is, if you study computer science, they're much more theoretical. And then the university where I studied is more about engineering and software engineering practices. But I was in their formal methods department studying program analysis and doing some work with CodeNarc.
Now, what was your project about? I don't remember the details.
So the project itself, well, it was a submission, so it was a lot of things. I was there to take regular master's classes because I only have a bachelor's degree. But I also took some independent study classes. So I worked with a really amazing professor there who helped me get through some like really low-level understandings of how CodeNarc works, how ASTs work, how compilers work, and took some classes with him as well. And so that was like the technical part of it, but it's also a cultural experience. And so there were outings that we did in learning more about Denmark. I was taking Danish language classes. Of course, I don't remember how to, now it's all mixed up with my German, but and it's very similar. Like the pronunciation is very different, but the grammar rules and the roots of words are very similar. And so I've had to forget a lot of it.
Yeah, that was an intensive program, right? It was like 9 months or something?
10. Yeah, so I started in August and I left after. So my last event was GreatConf of 2017.
Well, it sounds like it was a good experience at any rate.
It was. I don't regret it. Like I'm sad I didn't stay, but things happen, and life changes directions, right? But I learned a lot while I was there. It was my first experience really living outside the country. I had been to talks and thought that like visiting Europe was great, but it's a whole different experience living in Europe.
I can't imagine. I mean, is that partly that experience what encouraged you to move to Germany this time?
Definitely. So I wanted to stay in Europe, but Copenhagen just wasn't a good fit for me. I'm much happier in Berlin. It's a much more active and booming city with lots of culture and kind of. I know a lot of people don't like Berlin because it's a little bit grungy and gray and dark, but I kind of like that about it.
Well, we don't want to say anything negative about Copenhagen, I suppose, or you'll get
no. I still go back and visit. I'm still in the conference committee. Yeah. Like it's much more of a personal thing about like what I like about where I live. So.
Sure. I mean, not to imply anything there. Just I don't want your Twitter mentions to blow up accidentally. You know.
Oh gosh, again.
Well, but again, we don't have to worry too much about this because what do we have? 10 people listening to the podcast. You'll be all right. And
live, yeah, maybe. Yeah. Eventually. I know my boss listens, so.
Oh, really? Oh, so we have to say nice things about that then. Okay. So did you go to Berlin directly in Germany? I seem to remember you going somewhere else first. Was that wrong, or are you just looking around?
No, well, living. I've been traveling a lot. So one of the things that I've done while I was here is that I try to go to a new city every weekend, or not every weekend, but every month. So one weekend out of every month, I try to visit somewhere new. And so I've been lots of other places. You may have seen me tagged, but I live in Berlin, and I have for the last 15 months.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Now, the reason I brought up GreatConf, other than, of course, the fact that you're involved, is you mentioned that apparently the videos for the latest GreatConf in the EU will eventually be available, but right now they're, what did you say, in preview mode?
Right. So if you were an attendee of the conference, you got an email this morning with some very exclusive content. So hopefully those will be available publicly later. But it's definitely an advantage of going to the conference in person. That you get some of that content ahead of time.
So hopefully once everybody's had a chance to get the extra benefit of being an attendee, then they will be publicly available shortly thereafter.
Yeah, you should talk to Soren or us.
Yeah, well,
we'll ask Soren about it.
I'm sure we'll mention it on the podcast when they become publicly available, but it's nice to know that
they're coming. Yeah, he hasn't. He's been on vacation all summer. You should go check out lots of pictures of him and his family. Like we try to have a really nice balance. Like I know everyone's frustrated that the videos didn't come out in a timely manner, but it's amazing how and it takes a lot of work to do that. Like so, one of the things that I've definitely learned in being involved in the process and all of the chats and the communications is how much work it takes to organize a conference and how much of a wonderful job Soren does.
Well, I'm impressed. We're very grateful that he does it. I mean, I only have a sense of how much work that is, and that sense alone was enough to make me run away screaming. Yeah. So, yeah, I can't even imagine how much effort he puts into that thing. Okay, now you mentioned something. You actually had a link to a comment on Twitter about the origin of the name Spock for the testing framework.
Yeah, there's an interesting conversation going on. I think it's actually Soren again. So Soren had started a call for the logo of Spock, and there's been a lot of debate around it. The implications of whether it should be associated with the Star Trek Spock, or whether because the name originates from like the shortening of specification in Mach, which I guess was kind of news to me. I mean, it makes sense, right? I just had always thought that it was another cute, groovy pun, but that's a very practical name.
Oh, I've been making the gag for years that, I mean, I knew it was the shorthand for, or at least according to Peter Niederwiese, who created it, that it was short for specification in Mach. But I always would make the joke in my presentations that that's just a rationalization. He just wanted to name it after Spock, and then the rest he just came up with. But I don't really know. But very interesting that he's got the pull request and still technically no logo or whatever. But at any rate, the tweet is there, and we'll put it inside the show notes, as you say, just to mention about it.
It's an interesting topic.
Yeah, and you know, JUnit 5 has come out relatively recently, and that has changed the game as far as JUnit's concerned. I think they've learned a lot from Spock. The part that Spock, in my opinion, still has as an advantage is the parameterized tests. While they work in JUnit, first of all, in JUnit 5, they're still, quote, experimental. They're an additional module, the experimental module. And also, they don't have anything that's as clean as Spock data tables. I mean, they do have the nice little CSV source and CSV file source and everything, and a lot of nice mechanisms, but nothing beats Spock data tables at this point, I think. But we'll see how that plays out. I think some people are going through the issue now of because Spock provides a JUnit runner. If you move to JUnit 5, there are no JUnit runners anymore. There's only extensions. And I don't know when or if there's going to be a Spock extension for a JUnit. I'm hoping that they're at least working on it, or something's going on. I tried asking in the message group, but I never got a response. I'm not sure that what mechanism the Spock people are using to communicate these days, because that message board looks pretty low activity.
That's actually a really good question. So one of the reasons why I haven't played around too much with the new Groovy stuff is that the version of Spock is still at 2.4, and I'm not sure who's working on Spock. That would be really interesting to see. Not that I have time to actually contribute to it.
Well, but still, I mean, Soren should know that, right? I mean, Soren, he's on the group, the team, isn't he?
Yeah, so we should check it. Yeah,
well,
check for later.
He's European. He's been on vacation, so.
Hey.
Must be nice. Any rate, when he gets back, we could talk to him. Of course, there's also Rob Fletcher wrote that whole book on it, you know, so might be another guy. Pardon me?
He's been pretty busy with some other things.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. But at any rate, that was one. The OCI team has been very active, as you mentioned, also giving lots of Groovy talks. And, of course, Paul King was at GreatConf in the U.S. as well as in the EU, and he went on to ApacheCon, right, as you mentioned, to give his Groovy talk there about the future of Groovy. Were you thinking of anybody other than Paul when you mentioned the OCI team?
Yeah, so I think that it's really great that they've been going out and talking. I mean, there's a lot of stuff with Micronaut that I have another section on Micronaut in the notes, but it's nice to see that they're doing a lot of advocacy, because that's one of the things that we talk about internally as a community a lot, right? That there are no paid Groovy evangelists or developer advocates or anything, and it's really nice to see that OCI is investing in Paul and his work and getting them out to conferences and other things.
Yeah, I think Ivan Lopez was doing some stuff too, and
yeah, they're doing a lot on Micronaut and
right.
in other talks that are related to their core teams. But Groovy as a language has been kind of missing in general from a lot of the Java, like general Java conferences, or at least not as much as they used to be, and that's sad. That
seems to be an industry-wide thing. It's not. I mean, as you said, it's 15 years old now, and you know, it's not the hot hipster. It never really was the hipster language anyway. You know, it's just a language for getting things done. So, yeah, it's good to see that the talks are still going on as well. Now, you mentioned something about the Grails repo with an SSL, and
that was actually, I probably shouldn't talk about that too much. But if you have an issue with Grails the other day in building, actually we had one with JCenter this morning too. That there have been some issues with builds, like grabbing dependencies, and so there was like a whole day where I couldn't. I really wanted to help with. We're having this reloading issue in the new version of Grails, and so I couldn't get it to work in our massive giant app. So I tried to create like a basic example demo app and like reproduce the issue in like an out of the box demo. And then of course this is the one day that the SSL cert is expired, and so it can't pull the plugins. So it can't pull a bunch of stuff from the repositories because it keeps saying that the SSL cert is expired and it can't happen after. But they fixed it very quickly.
Yeah. At least the good news on that is that's an easy fix. So.
Oh yeah, but yeah, I think there were some issues with a provider. So it's, I mean, for me, like, so it happened during the day here in Europe, but probably by the time everyone in the US started working, it wasn't a problem anymore.
Well, then we'll probably take that out because it's a solved problem, right? It's already fixed.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Now you did mention Gradle 4.10, and we have mentioned Gradle 4.10 on our last podcast, I think. But the Gradle also has a newsletter, and they recently published the. By the way, it's a very good newsletter. I think they do a really good job with it. And if you just go, I think it's at newsletter.gradle.org, something like that. Is that right? Yeah, remember, I'll check it. But at any rate, the most recent newsletter talked about the fact that they are moving to Gradle 5 next.
Yep.
And of course, the big deal on that one is the announcement of the Kotlin DSL 1.0. It is, by the way, newsletter.gradle.com is the version of that. So the August newsletter mentioned that in Gradle 4.10, they've got the Kotlin DSL 1.0 RC, the release candidate. Mm-hmm. And I know they're planning to move on from there. What is it? Is there anything specific you wanted to mention about Gradle 4.10 or whatever?
No, I just think it's an interesting thing to talk about. I know you know a lot more about that aspect than I do, but just that they officially released it, I think, since the last time you did a podcast. So I thought it should be mentioned. And
well, if that's the case, definitely we have to mention it. Yeah, I'm just glancing through the newsletter, and now they have blog posts on the Gradle improvements in IntelliJ IDEA, and then the fact you could do script debugging. Supposedly, you could set a breakpoint in a Gradle script.
That was so interesting. So, I mean, because I know that's been a major problem, and one of the things that I cite is like one of the reasons why Groovy is not as great for doing it. But if IntelliJ, well, not if, I know they have, because obviously I've watched the demos of that. Having that debugging is really big for Groovy, and hopefully that will encourage more people, or not encourage, but maybe help more people with their Groovy-based build scripts.
Well, and the demo's by Trisha G, and she's always excellent. And I noticed she's one of the people that invited you on your monthly, I'm going to go spend a week somewhere in Europe trip to go visit her.
Oh, you did see that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I follow Trisha, of course. She's in Seville, right? Or Sevilla.
Yeah.
Are you thinking of that one?
Okay, so yeah, it's one of the later things that so as a European, I have lots of holiday time now. So I can't take too much time away from the new cat, but I do want to go somewhere, and I do want to relax. And so I've been looking at different places, and I really can't deal with the heat, so I didn't want to go to Spain or somewhere on the Mediterranean during the summer. Because I just can't deal with it. But end of September might be really nice, according to the weather reports that I looked at. The other one that keeps coming up is it Malaga? There's another really common destination in Spain that's not too far from there that you can get really cheap tickets from Berlin, so that might also be an option.
If it's Malaga, that's where Hadi Hariri is based, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
I did not know that.
About any of that. No, if you go see Trisha, of course, you'll get to play with the little ones, you know, the toddlers. She's got 2 little kids now, under age 3, I guess.
Oh, my.
They're adorable, though. I mean, of course, I'm seeing them via pictures and everything, but she's brought them to conferences and done presentations.
I did see that, yeah.
Yeah, right. She's had a really good experience with that. And, of course, her husband's a goofball. You'll have to meet him at some point. Any rate, that she does the monthly, what is it called? Java monthly update or whatever. Right, for IntelliJ. And yeah, she mentioned the Gradle debugging capabilities inside of IntelliJ. But again, they've got the stuff about executing Kotlin scripts and so on. And I saw the migration guide today. I just glanced at some of the migration guide from Groovy DSL to the Kotlin DSL, and I am not. I don't know that that's going to sell a lot of product that way. You know, I don't know.
I mean, okay, so this is actually a really like interesting thing to talk about. So obviously, as Groovy people, we should like we need to have a statistic of how long in the podcast we can go until we mention Kotlin. But we have to learn to play together, right? There are good use cases. So I recently spent a little more time getting to know our Android team lead at ZenJob, and he's a major Kotlin advocate. And so I see some of the advantages of it. I haven't used, well, actually, no, that might not be true because I did a hackathon for the Android team. So I guess I technically did write a line or two of Kotlin code. But there's use cases, and in the Android community, it's a major win. We have to admit that as a community, the Groovy support for Android never really made it. Right. There wasn't a lot of work put into it. I mean, I know like Andrew and Cedric have done a lot, but they didn't have a lot of time to do it either. They didn't have a lot of support from a company to pay them to do it, like Kotlin has with JetBrains. And when you can put the resources into that, like you're going to get the community and everybody to support Kotlin. And like there's still uses for Groovy in lots of other ways, but I have to admit that for Android stuff, the Kotlin build scripts and Kotlin as a language takes over.
Well, certainly in Android. I mean, without a doubt. I think I agree with you that Andrew, and again, I'm going to mispronounce his name. It's either Reitz or Reitz. I just don't remember which way he pronounces it. If it was German, it'd be Reitz, but I think he says Reitz anyway. At any rate, Andrew did an excellent job. Cedric started it off, and Andrew worked on it a lot after that. But as you say, he wasn't paid to work on that, and it didn't catch on in the community. Whereas Kotlin was designed from the beginning to be small and fast, and that's something that's a high priority under limited memory and limited power devices, like on Android. And when Google decided to endorse it, you know, I still have a bit of a bone to pick. Well, it's not that. It said I remember going to Xavier Ducroix, if I'm pronouncing that anywhere near correctly, at the Gradle Summit in 2016 and saying, you know, are you going to say anything about any language other than Java? And having him say, no, we're just going to leave that to the community. We're going to stick with Java the whole time. And then a year later at the Gradle Summit, suddenly it's
everything's Kotlin.
Yeah, it's like, hey guys, come on, you just said. But regardless, yeah, I agree with you. And I've been spending a lot of time with Kotlin lately because of Android. As you say, it's really Kotlin's killer app. What I'm debating, though, what I'm trying to wonder is whether it's going to be a big deal in Gradle or not. Now, as you say, you can't match the IDE support. I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's made by an IDE manufacturer. How could you possibly? You know? Well,
and even like the design of the language, right? That the dynamic of nature of Groovy can be a plus and a minus.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and of course the static typing and the static binding, as you say, you know, by default will help out the IDEs. Although I noticed in the Kotlin conversion guide, the porting guide for migration, I guess they called it, from Groovy to Kotlin, they point out that the Eclipse support's not there yet. You know, even though the JetBrains people are going to make the Kotlin plugin, it's really focused on IntelliJ, which of course it would be, but we're going to see how that affects the community too, because a lot of people are still on Eclipse and Eclipse-based products like Spring Tool Suite.
I always wondered about that. It was one of the early announcements around the time of the Gradle announcement that JetBrains was going to maintain an Eclipse plugin for Kotlin, and I wondered how that worked with their like whole business. And it's sad that they haven't been able to make everyone happy. I know it did a little bit of research into it to see. And there's lots of people angry on Twitter, which is not that uncommon, but yeah, definitely disappointed that Eclipse is not equal to the experience in IntelliJ, which has always been the case, right?
Right. I mean, it's a better product all around. I agree with you. But I hadn't heard anything about the Eclipse support since that initial announcement either.
Okay.
Maybe it'd be worth talking to Trisha or Hadi or somebody at IntelliJ about what the status is, because there's no way they're going to leave out that whole market. It's a way to grow the Kotlin community and then eventually transition them to the paid tool. But we'll see. At any rate, that'll be something we'll talk a lot more about when.
We can only speculate in gossip, so we shouldn't.
Well, and also when Gradle 5.0 comes out, then it'll be time to talk about that. That's another reason why we haven't spent a lot of time on the podcast talking about Micronaut yet either, because it's not really out yet. Although, was it today? No. Did they announce that today? I saw a tweet that said by September 30th, they'll have Micronaut 1.0 release candidate 1 or something like that. Did you see that same thing?
I didn't see that tweet, but I saw a talk from Jeff recently, very recently. That was awesome, and kind of laid out a little bit of that timeline.
It is a dazzling talk. I mean, when he does it, I saw him do it in St. Louis with Graham there as well. Graham Roche was there, and it's very impressive. I mean, it really is awesome. And part of the best part about Micronaut is that it takes features that you would normally associate with a cloud provider, and it builds them right into the framework. Things like discovery and publication and what a failover, all that stuff that normally you would think of as part of the cloud provider itself, they built right into the framework and made it very easy.
Well, and things that as developers we don't often like to think about, that it's like something you set up once or something you set up every now and then. And so I often get it wrong. And like in bigger companies and enterprises, you often have like a team or people that manage the infrastructure. But for really small teams that don't want to deal with like managing all of that, it's great.
Yeah, well, definitely when they go 1.0 for real, I'm sure we'll see if we can get Jeff Brown to come on the podcast to talk about that. I mean, it's not like you've had to encourage him to talk about it. He's been doing it everywhere, as you said.
Yeah, actually, yeah. So I was really happy that he gave a talk for the Berlin Groovy user group, even though I'm very sad it was poorly attended. It was a fantastic talk, and OCI definitely reached out to us to try and get that. Like, they were very proactive about it. And for me, it was easy just to announce it and try to get people to come.
Was it a scheduling thing, or do you just think it's still early and people just haven't caught on to it yet?
So I think it's still summer in Berlin. So a lot of people were out of town, or like we had several people sign up and then just not show. I started texting everyone, hey, like, where are you? Oh, I forgot it was tonight. That kind of stuff. So.
Okay. You did mention in your little interview section that you wanted to say something about Mr. Hockey doing the Spring REST docs example. Right.
Yeah. So it was really encouraging. So of course I've given lots of talks on Spring REST docs. That's one of the things that I've gotten a bit of notoriety for outside of the Groovy community. And so I saw recently that the Micronaut stuff, and he made a jump that I hadn't yet, because I hadn't looked at all of the Micronaut stuff, that you can use Spring REST docs for Micronaut and for kind of going between the different microservices. I haven't had a lot of time to look at his examples, but they're really interesting, and everyone should look at them, of course. And I definitely will in the next few weeks once I have free time again. And I think that I'm gonna go in that direction too. So one of the things that I in my Spring REST docs talk, I often do a lot of slides and not a lot of demo. And the times that I've done demos, it takes forever to run, because these are like full functional tests. So you have to like spin up an entire Girls application to like test all of the different APIs, and that can take a bit of time, especially like if you're sitting on a stage and then I have to like start making jokes while it's running. But Micronaut seems really nice for that use case, that I can run those tests a lot faster and show the functionality of Spring REST docs without having to worry about any overhead of any testing frameworks or anything in particular.
That sounds great, by the way. And I you are well known for working on the spring rest docs part of it. I've seen your presentations a few times, but it's nice to see that Mr. Hockey's basically started a whole series of posts on Micronaut related topics. So that'll be very useful when it comes time to really dig into it. Now, a couple other things. One was that, of course, today I saw the tweet and you retweeted it. Actually, I think I followed them already. Was the how do you say it? Great DI, GR8DI, the diversity initiative.
Great diversity, yeah, Great DI was the idea. So it's a more general diversity initiative than just Great Ladies. We wanted to expand out into other areas. Of course, Professor Marcel, who we had last time, has done an amazing job. He does, honestly, he does a majority of the work. I have the domain. It's like all I had to do was redirect the domain and deal with the DNS stuff. But a lot of the work and the mentorship of the interns, stuff like that, he's doing on his own.
I still feel bad about the quality of the internet connection we had during that podcast. We've got to somehow find a way to talk to him when either he has a really good connection or he's traveling or something. We'll just have to work that out in the future.
Well, that's been one of the challenges that, so I've known him for a couple of years now. And actually, so we didn't talk about the origin of how he and I got introduced. Yeah. So he originally applied to come to GreatConf EU when I was running the Diversity Tickets Initiative. And he's really humble. He had an amazing application. He's done so many amazing things in the Groovy community, like as far as building and like the whole essay of the things that he had done to get this ticket. And he ended up getting picked. His application was by far the best. But we had some visa issues, and we really struggled to get him to come to Europe. I know he's had some other visa issues getting out of Cameroon in general. We always have internet issues. It's really inconsistent. A lot of days they have issues with power connectivity. So I've had to be, well, not I've had to be. I've really become very empathetic to the challenges that people face outside of the EU and in the US. But he's doing amazing things, especially considering the resources that he has. And we're like working and in fact, so a majority of the budget he's talked about, a majority of the budget for the program has actually gone to pay for internet. That they need to get a better provider, they need to get a better modem, things like that, because they're now working. So even a router and a device that worked for like just him at home doesn't work for all of them in the office. Like the more people that they add to the network, the worse it gets. So we're finding all kinds of different challenges there, and he's done a really great job of solving all of those.
Well, I saw two tweets from them today. One was that their website that the kids are putting together went live today. It's got all the basics in there. There's a job posting section and there's a news section and everything. I also saw that he posted a picture of the kids that are participating, which was great. So it was great to see that all this activity going on out there.
Yeah. I've been trying to get them to send me pictures and things to promote what they're doing, because a lot of people don't know about it. And I'm excited to hear it. I actually am in their channel, so I see all of their stand-up messages. I see what they're doing every day. I try to answer. I don't have that much time because I am still working full-time and doing a bunch of stuff on the side that we can talk about later. But it is nice to see them and help them when I can. And so the idea is that the site there is a landing page. They're obviously doing a lot more than just what's there, but we wanted to create an entire process for them. So they've learned how to use GitHub. They've learned how to deploy a site to production, even if it's the site itself is very basic and just a landing page. We're going through these processes. We're learning about paired programming and some of the challenges that they face with new technologies, with internet connectivity issues, with all of the things that are happening. And so, yeah.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to mention for those who haven't checked yet, it said www.gradi.com. They now have the homepage there and a projects page and job page and contact us and everything. So I'm sure it's going to be growing considerably over time. I think as you said, they just want to have something to show for it at this point while they're working actively on the more back end services.
And learning, a lot of it's learning. They're definitely bachelor's level students. And a lot of the things that I remember too that I learned in university didn't, like, I spent a lot of time in those first few months after university learning about the real world and all of the tools that we use in the real world. So we're investing a lot there too.
Well, we're going to do everything we can to help encourage them and in their efforts and everything. So I'm glad that I definitely wanted to bring that up anyway. I'm glad you mentioned it as well. Now, let's see, on the topics that you were talking about, that you listed as part of your quote interview thing you were willing to talk about, why don't you just pick what you'd like to discuss out of that? Or just anything in general, you know, what you're planning, what you're doing now, what you're planning to do, anything about the Berlin user group, or anything you want.
Yeah. So actually that was the structure that originally was there, that we would first talk about the launch that happened today and their little celebration. So they'd have a little bit of a party for the release. So that was kind of cool too. I've been up to a lot of things. So like I said, it's been 2 years since I've been on the podcast. I've actually moved locations again. I worked for ZenJob for a long time. That was pretty demanding of me and my time. So I definitely have stepped back in a lot of other ways. I'm not giving as many conference talks as I used to, and especially I haven't really left Europe for conference talks, except for, like, I went to Spring One last year, but I'm not going this year. I'm definitely way overburdened. And so I've had to step back in a lot of things, but I am still watching a lot of projects. I'm really excited to see all of the new contributions to CodeNarc. So of course, CodeNarc has been very much something that I've been involved with and passionate about for a long time, and spent that long time working on it. So even if I haven't had time, I'm glad to see other people are still contributing.
Just reminding people who may not be aware, CodeNarc being the code analysis tool for Groovy, the static analysis tool, right?
Static analysis tool, yes. So it's not just a linter. It goes way beyond linting and does some analysis, some deeper analysis into best practices, and it's highly configurable. You can set your own rules and standards guides based on your team and organization. The Grails team has some other good guides related to CodeNarc too. And a little bit of self-promotion. I've given a couple talks, so you can go watch those.
Excellent. You've also mentioned some things about Jeb as well.
Oh, right. Yeah. So we, a couple months ago, had Kevin Vidic come to talk at the Berlin Groovy user group. And it was very well timed because I've spent some time, not really, I mean, I'm not a manager, I'm not supervising them, but perhaps assisting with and helping set up our test automation team. And they're great. We have a full-time, very professional tester whose experience is mostly in Selenium and a bunch of other things that I'm not a tester, so I can't remember the names of right now. And paired her with a working student to set up Jeb for doing a bunch of automated tests. And we've integrated that in, so we had another engineer, Tamer, who I don't think you know of from the community, but he's active and also in Berlin. Set up test containers for our organization, and for this entire project, it's been kind of interesting to see because I never had the experience to work on Jeb before, or not work with, sorry. Mm-hmm. And it's a really great thing. So I'm really hoping that we can convince them to give some talks about it now. I was more, again, in a watching mode there. If they had problems with connecting into Jenkins or specific Groovy things, I'd answer questions. But the working student, Daniel, and the QA, remember Asha, she's done a great job, and I hope I can get them to give some talks on that.
I'm sorry, I missed that person's name. Got a little garbled there for a moment.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I do notice that the internet connection is. I hope it's not on my side. Cutting out. Your picture keeps freezing. But
I hope it's not on my end either. I don't know. But anyway, what was the name of the person you mentioned?
So Daniel's our working student, and Asha, the QA tester. I'm not gonna butcher their last names, but they work for ZenJob. So if you look for them, you can follow them on.
I thought you were mentioning somebody giving a presentation on the Jeb team or whatever. Yeah, I didn't.
No. I'm hoping that. So we've been using it locally, or not locally, but at ZenJob, and I'm hoping to get them to talk at the Groovy user group, and then we can share and talk about maybe some things that they've learned. It's been interesting to set up all of that stuff. We have a giant application, and so there's a lot of test cases.
Well, okay, now I have to ask you, what's your next move? What are your plans for the future? Where are you going? What are you looking for? You hinted that there were some big things happening.
Yeah. So I obviously have been talking kind of fondly of some of the projects and things that I've done. I was a major part of the Grails upgrade at ZenJob, but kind of that organization has grown a lot in the last 15 months that I've been there, and we've kind of gone in different directions. So I am looking for something new. I did put in notice. So after the 10th of September, I'm going to take my 3 weeks of European holiday, and then I don't know what's next. I've done, software engineering for a while. I've always thought that it would be kind of cool to start my own startup. I investigated a few different options. Unfortunately, the first idea that I had, I decided not to launch. We got into some competitor analysis and realized that it's going to take too much to get into that market. So I don't think I'm going to do that. But I've been talking with a few other, with companies, with startups. I think I might apply to an incubator, but if anyone has any ideas or things that they think would be a good fit for me, please let me know.
Wow.
Starting October 1.
Well, we know OCI is hiring for
always, yeah.
Although, but that's not exactly what the category you're describing, but that.
Well, and so one of the things that's kind of been maybe perhaps a blocker is that I do want to stay in Berlin. So I'm not ready to go back to the US yet. So I do need visa sponsorship. And that gets a little bit tricky, particularly for some remote companies that don't have offices in Berlin. I'm also kind of interested in a culture of diversity. So I have always worked as the only woman on a team. And in fact, I'm probably one of the most visible women in Groovy. So often people are like, oh, find more of yourself. And
yeah,
there aren't that many. So if you, and it's not just about women and diversity with women, but diversity in lots of different other ways too. And encouraging it, not necessarily that you already have a diverse team, but that you have the structure in place to support people who are underrepresented in the unique challenges that they face.
That sounds good. You'd probably want to talk to Trisha as well. I'm sure she'd be aware of what's going on at JetBrains also.
Yeah.
And of course, she's probably got, I know you have lots of contacts throughout the industry, but I'm sure she also, whether she wants to be or not, is a clearinghouse for hearing about things happening with women in the industry as well. It seems to be hard for most women I know to avoid doing that. In fact, yeah. So, well, that definitely good luck on whatever. Please let us know whatever you decide to do. If you decide to go the startup route or something like that, well, we may never see you again because you'll be buried in work in that case, But I hope you find something that is both interesting and gives you a chance to take advantage of your skills, both on the technical side and on the organizational and soft skills side as well, and provides the diversity environment you're looking for.
Yeah.
That'd be great. I'm a one-person company, so I can't really help, but nevertheless.
Yeah, that's so scary for me. In particular, having to deal with living in another country. Like if I was living in the U.S., like I'm fairly familiar. Like after I'm doing all of the tax and legal paperwork for Great Ladies, like of how the organizational structure works in the U.S. and particularly in Minnesota. But over here, I'm in a whole new world.
Definitely. Well, but please let us know. Please keep us informed, as to what's going on. And again, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I was actually thinking this week we were due for another one, and you may remember. I know, kind of obscure. Do you remember Baruch Sadegorski? You ever heard of him?
Maybe that one time.
Yeah, he's just
maybe met him
guy,
at a few different places. Yeah. No.
Yeah, as usual, he's off at a conference somewhere.
Yeah.
So
that would be nice too. So maybe I'll get a new job where I can speak more.
Well, Jay Frog's looking for a developer advocate all the time, but again, that's another issue. That's whether you want to do that sort of thing or not. But at any rate, we weren't going to be able to do a podcast this week, and then I heard you mentioned you were available, and it's like, oh, perfect. That's exactly what I was hoping for. So thank you very much for being here. And again, whenever you decide you have something you want to talk about, please, you're welcome to do so, even if it's helping out, standing in for the great DI people or anything else going on in your life or your career.
Or we can just chat about news.
Or we could chat about news. Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, it's sort of like oh my God, I'm going to date myself again. The old Johnny Carson show where he would be gone for months and they'd have fill-in people. Well, we can gradually get rid of Baruch that way. And you could be, it's I never really liked him anyway. I mean, honestly, no, that's not true. I like Baruch, but this is going to be the test. But this is going to be the test to see if he actually listens to the podcast. Because I'm not 100% sure he even listens. When
I'm going to have so many angry tweets on my mentions now.
Yes. Well, we'll find out. Okay, just send them my way. It's okay. All right. Well, again, thank you very much. I appreciate you accommodating the hour. That was really nice of you, because I can see it getting darker and darker as the
actually. So my original plan was that I wanted to podcast from the balcony, because it was absolutely gorgeous outside. And then I saw that the sunset was a little earlier and earlier now that it's the end of the summer. So I had to frantically move inside at the last minute. But hopefully I got the lighting set up. You can still see me. And everything, so.
Yeah, no problem at all. I mean, if it wasn't for the internet issues, we'd be fine. And again, that's the problem with not having any production values whatsoever. So, okay, well, I'll straighten out the show notes. I mean, I'll add a bunch of links and things in there. Let
me know if you need my help. I can.
Oh, be careful when you volunteer for something like that, because I hate doing the paperwork part of this.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll chat then.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's glue tasks.
Okay, yeah, exactly. That's a glue task. That's exactly what you said before on Twitter and stuff. All right, well, let me end this, and then we can talk about cleaning up all that stuff. So thank you very much, and definitely best wishes to you, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, bye-bye.